I stood frozen in the grand ballroom of Sky Lounge, watching as security guards escorted Victoria Davenport and her father Marcus out of what they believed was their own charity gala. The flash of cameras captured every moment of their humiliation. Victoria's face was sheet white, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the shock and rage contorting her features. This was supposed to be her night, her moment to shine in front of the city's elite. Instead, she was being removed from my property, from my building, in front of everyone who mattered. The red wine stain on my power dress was still wet, a badge of honor now, rather than the mark of shame she had intended it to be. Just 30 minutes ago, she had deliberately knocked that glass onto me, her voice dripping with contempt as she called me a failure, suggesting I had come to beg for a janitorial position. Her friends had laughed. She had signaled security to throw me out like trash. But I wasn't trash anymore. I was Amelia Ashford, and I owned every square foot of the building beneath our feet. If you want to know how a woman who was once thrown out of her own family home came to own an empire and bring down the people who destroyed her, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation, because trust me, this story gets even better. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the day my world shattered, and I realized that the family I had tried so hard to belong to never wanted me at all. 3 years earlier, I had been living in the Davenport penthouse, but calling it living would be generous. I existed there like a piece of furniture that was occasionally useful, but mostly in the way. My father had been Marcus Davenport's older brother, a brilliant tech innovator who died when I was just 8 years old. My mother had passed away 2 years before that, leaving me orphaned and completely alone in a world that seemed designed to remind me of that fact every single day. Marcus had taken me in, but it was never out of love. It was obligation wrapped in the thinnest veneer of duty, and perhaps a calculated desire to appear magnanimous to the outside world. After all, what better PR for a ruthless businessman than playing the role of generous uncle? Growing up in that gilded cage, I learned quickly that I was not truly family. I was the poor relation, the charity case. The constant reminder of a brother Marcus seemed desperate to forget. His daughter Victoria, 2 years younger than me, was the golden child who could do no wrong. Everything she touched turned to praise and celebration, while everything I accomplished was met with dismissive criticism, or worse, complete indifference, as if my achievements were so insignificant they didn't warrant acknowledgement. I tried so hard to earn their approval that it became an obsession, a sickness that consumed me. I excelled in school, pushing myself until I collapsed from exhaustion more than once. I graduated top of my class from business school, thinking surely this would make Marcus proud. It didn't. I worked endless hours in the lower ranks of Davenport Corporation, often staying until 2 or 3 in the morning, hoping someone would notice my dedication. No one did. I poured my father's inheritance, a modest trust fund that should have been my safety net, into projects that Marcus claimed would secure my future in the company. I planned family events that Victoria would later take credit for. I stayed silent when she presented my ideas as her own in meetings. I smiled through dinner parties where Marcus would introduce me with that same rehearsed line, "This is Amelia, my orphaned niece. We took her in after the tragedy. She's been with us ever since." As if I were a rescue dog, I told myself it was normal. I told myself that if I just tried harder, worked smarter, proved myself more valuable, they would finally see me as one of them. I told myself that family meant sacrifice, that love had to be earned through suffering and service. Every rejection was a test I had failed. Every criticism was a lesson I needed to learn. Every humiliation was character building. I was lying to myself, but I didn't know it yet. The cracks had always been there, hairline fractures in the facade I had built to survive. Small cruelties that I learned to excuse, to rationalize, to absorb like a sponge soaking up poison. Victoria borrowing my designer clothes without asking, wearing them to events, and returning them with wine stains or cigarette burns. When I finally worked up the courage to mention it, she laughed. "Oh, Amelia, don't be so materialistic. They're just clothes. Besides, they look better on me anyway." Marcus would chuckle and tell me not to be petty. Marcus forgetting to invite me to important company meetings where decisions affecting my projects were made. When I asked why I hadn't been included, his response was always the same. "Did I forget to add you my apologies? These things happen. You can read the minutes." But there were never any minutes. The way conversations would halt abruptly when I entered a room as if I had interrupted something private, something I had no right to hear. The way Marcus and Victoria would exchange glances, entire conversations happening in those looks, while I stood there feeling like an intruder in what was supposed to be my own home. The subtle comments that cut deeper than any overt insult. "You're so lucky we took you in, Amelia. Most orphans don't get opportunities like this. You should be more grateful. Other families would have sent you to boarding school. We treat you like our own daughter." That last one was particularly cruel because it was so obviously untrue, and yet they said it often enough that other people believed it. At dinner parties, Victoria would regale guests with stories of our family that somehow never included me, or if I was mentioned, it was always as an afterthought. And Amelia lives with us too. She's family by circumstance, but we love her anyway. By circumstance. As if my father Marcus's own brother was just a circumstance. I pushed down the hurt until I couldn't feel it anymore, or at least I told myself I couldn't. I swallowed the resentment until it became a hard knot in my chest that I learned to ignore. I convinced myself that this was what love looked like in a family like the Davenports, polished and distant and conditional, but still family, still better than being alone. I was so afraid of being alone that I accepted being lonely instead. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in October. I had been working for 18 months on a technology project, a revolutionary software platform that could transform how commercial buildings managed energy consumption. It was based on initial concepts from my father's old notebooks, ideas he had sketched out years before his death. I had spent countless nights refining the algorithms, meeting with engineers, investing my own money into the prototype. Marcus had seemed supportive, asking for regular updates, reviewing my progress reports. He told me this could be my big break, the project that would prove I had Davenport blood running through my veins after all. I was so hungry for his approval that I shared everything with him, every detail, every breakthrough, every stumbling block. That Tuesday, I arrived at the office early, excited to present the final prototype to the board. This was supposed to be my moment. But when I walked into the conference room, I found Marcus already at the head of the table, my prototype displayed on the screen behind him. He was presenting my work as his own. I stood in the doorway, unable to breathe, as he described the innovative features I had developed, the market potential I had identified, the implementation strategy I had planned. The board members nodded approvingly. Victoria sat beside him, beaming with pride at her father's brilliance. I must have made a sound because Marcus looked up and saw me. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt exactly, but acknowledgement. He knew I knew. Then he smiled that charming smile he used on investors and journalists, and gestured for me to sit down. "Ah, Amelia, good timing. I was just telling the board about our new project. You've been assisting with some of the research, haven't you? Good work." Assisting with the research, my project, my father's legacy, reduced to assistance. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell everyone the truth. But I was paralyzed by a lifetime of conditioning, of being taught that I should be grateful, that I should not make waves, that I should accept whatever scraps the Davenports chose to throw my way. So I sat down. And watched Marcus take credit for 18 months of my life, for my father's genius, for my future. And when the board voted to move forward with the project under Marcus's leadership, granting him a massive budget and company resources, I managed to keep the smile on my face. I told myself it would still benefit me somehow. I told myself that Marcus would surely give me credit later, that this was just politics, that I needed to be patient. But I was lying to myself. After the meeting, I tried to speak to Marcus privately. He was in his office already, on the phone with reporters, announcing the Davenport Corporation's exciting new innovation. When he finally hung up, he looked at me with something close to pity. "Amelia, you need to understand how the world works," he said, his voice almost kind, which made it worse. "You're talented, I'll give you that. But you don't have the presence, the connections, the name recognition to launch something like this. Under my leadership, this project will change the industry. Isn't that what matters? That your father's ideas finally come to life." "My ideas, too," I whispered. "Those were my ideas, Uncle Marcus. I developed them. I funded the research." "With what money, Amelia? The modest trust fund your father left you, that's barely enough to cover the patent fees. You should be thanking me for seeing potential in your little hobby project and giving it the platform it needs to succeed." Hobby project. 18 months of my life dismissed as a hobby. "I want credit," I said, my voice stronger now. "I want my name on the patents. I want a leadership role in the implementation." Marcus's expression hardened. You've lived under my roof for 15 years, eaten my food-worn clothes, I paid for, attended schools, funded by my success, and now you want more. This is the problem with you, Amelia. You've never understood gratitude. You've never understood your place. My place, I'm family. I'm your brother's daughter. You're the orphan I took in out of the goodness of my heart. Don't confuse obligation with love, dear. And don't forget that I can end your employment at any time. This company is mine. That penthouse you live in, mine. The car you drive, mine. Everything you have is because I allow it. The words hit me like physical blows. I stared at this man I had called uncle for 15 years and finally saw him clearly. The mask had dropped. There was no affection in his eyes, no family loyalty, just calculation and control. I left his office in a daze. I wandered through the Davenport Corporation building, past my small windowless office in the basement level, past Victoria's corner suite, with the view of the harbor, past the portraits of Marcus, hanging in the executive wing. I saw everything with new eyes. I went home to the penthouse, to my small bedroom in the back corner of the sprawling residence, and I sat on my bed and looked around at my life. The expensive furniture that had never felt like mine. The closet full of designer clothes that Victoria would borrow and ruin. The window that faced a brick wall while hers faced the sunset. This wasn't a home, it was a prison. That night, Victoria came home from a shopping trip with friends. She swept past my bedroom door, then paused and backtracked. She was carrying shopping bags from the most exclusive boutiques in the city. "Oh, Amelia, I heard about the meeting this morning. Daddy told me all about it." She leaned against my doorframe, a smile playing on her lips. "You must be so happy that your little research project is finally going to amount to something under his guidance. See, this is why Daddy's the genius. He knows how to take rough ideas and polish them into gold." "It wasn't rough," I said quietly. "It was complete. It was ready." "Well, obviously not, or he wouldn't have had to restructure the entire approach." She examined her manicured nails. "You know, you should really learn to be more of a team player. All this me isn't a good look. We're family. What's good for the Davenport name is good for all of us." "I'm an Ashford," I heard myself say. "My name is Ashford." Victoria laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Legally, maybe, but really, Amelia, who are you kidding? You're a Davenport by charity, and charity can be withdrawn at any time." She left and I sat there in the growing darkness, her words echoing in my mind. Charity can be withdrawn at any time. The next morning, I made the first decision that was truly mine in 15 years. I called in sick to work. Then I went to the bank and withdrew every penny from my trust fund. It wasn't as much as I had hoped. Marcus had been managing it for me, and somehow the investments he had recommended had all performed poorly. What should have grown to over $2 million was barely $600,000. But it was mine. It was all I had that was truly mine. I rented a small studio apartment across town, the kind of place I never would have considered before, with thin walls and a radiator that clanged at night. I packed one suitcase with my clothes, the ones Victoria hadn't borrowed, and I left the penthouse while everyone was at work. I didn't leave a note. I didn't ask for permission. I just left. For 3 days, my phone exploded with messages, but they weren't concerned messages asking if I was okay. They were angry messages demanding I return immediately. Marcus called me ungrateful and accusing me of stealing family resources by taking my own money from my own account. Victoria called me dramatic and pathetic. They threatened to cut me off completely, as if that threat meant anything anymore. I blocked their numbers. I didn't return to Davenport Corporation. I didn't answer their lawyers' letters. I simply disappeared from their lives. And then I got angry. For 2 weeks, I let myself feel everything I had suppressed for years. The rage, the betrayal, the grief for all the time I had wasted trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I cried until I had no tears left. I raged until my throat was raw. I mourned the family I had never really had. And then I started planning. I had $600,000, a brilliant mind, and nothing left to lose. I had my father's notebooks, which I had hidden away years ago, filled with innovations that Marcus didn't even know existed. And I had something Marcus would never understand, a hunger not born from greed, but from necessity, a determination forged in the fires of humiliation and rejection. I started researching. The technology sector was evolving rapidly, and I could see opportunities that the established players like Davenport Corporation were too arrogant to notice. I found a small startup team, brilliant engineers, who had been overlooked by the major companies, and I made them an offer. I offered them equity, creative control, and a chance to build something that mattered. We worked day and night in a rented warehouse space, surviving on coffee and dreams. My $600,000 disappeared quickly, swallowed by development costs and legal fees. I maxed out credit cards. I ate ramen for months. I learned what it meant to truly invest in something not just with money, but with everything I had. 8 months later, we launched Phoenix Enterprises. The name was intentional. I was rising from the ashes of the life Marcus had burned down. Our first product was a revolution in smart building technology far superior to anything Davenport Corporation had developed. It was based on my father's original concepts, the ones Marcus had never even known about, combined with cutting-edge AI algorithms. Within 3 months, we had our first major client. Within 6 months, we had 20. The technology world started paying attention to Phoenix Enterprises. Articles appeared in trade magazines. Investors started calling. And I made sure to mention in every interview that I was the daughter of James Ashford, the innovator whose early work had laid the foundation for modern building automation systems. I never mentioned Marcus. I never mentioned the Davenports. I simply didn't need to. But I knew they were watching. I knew that every article about Phoenix Enterprises, every mention of my success, was a thorn in Marcus's side. The company he had built on my father's stolen ideas was starting to look outdated compared to what I was creating. A year after leaving the penthouse, Phoenix Enterprises was valued at $50 million. Investors were lining up wanting a piece of what we had built. But I was careful. I maintained majority control. I remembered the lessons Marcus had taught me, though not the ones he intended. I learned that success is the best revenge, but only if it's done right. I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted to reclaim everything that had been taken from my father from me. I wanted justice, not just victory. And then I learned something interesting. The Davenport Tower, the crown jewel of Marcus's real estate portfolio. The building that housed both the Davenport Corporation offices and that luxurious penthouse was in financial trouble. Marcus had leveraged the property heavily to fund a series of failed expansions, and he was behind on payments. The building was going to be sold, quietly, discreetly, to avoid embarrassing the great Marcus Davenport. The sale was being handled through intermediaries, and Marcus assumed it would go to a friendly investor who would allow him to maintain his offices and residence. I contacted the bank holding the note. I made an offer they couldn't refuse, and I set up the purchase through a shell corporation so complex that not even the most thorough investigation could trace it back to me. At least not until I wanted them to. 60 days later, I owned Davenport Tower. Marcus and Victoria had no idea. They continued living in the penthouse, working in their offices, completely unaware that everything beneath their feet now belonged to me. I spent those 60 days planning. I knew Marcus and Victoria. I knew their patterns, their social calendar, their need to be seen and admired by the elite. The annual product launch gala was approaching, a massive event that Davenport Corporation hosted at Sky Lounge, the exclusive venue on the top floor of the tower. They had sent out invitations to everyone who mattered in the city: politicians, investors, journalists, competitors. It was meant to showcase Davenport Corporation's latest innovations, which I knew from industry contacts were largely repackaged versions of existing technology. Marcus's creative well had run dry without access to my father's ideas or my innovations. I didn't need an invitation. I owned the venue. On the night of the gala, I prepared carefully. I chose a crimson dress that screamed power, not the soft pastels Victoria always said were more suitable for me. I hired a professional to do my hair and makeup. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She wasn't the orphaned girl desperate for approval. She was a force to be reckoned with. I arrived at Sky Lounge at 8:30 after the event had been underway for an hour. The security guard at the entrance looked confused when I walked up, probably because I wasn't on the guest list. But before he could say anything, I handed him a card identifying me as the building owner and instructed him to alert the head of security to my presence. I walked into the event like I owned it, because I did. The ballroom was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city at night. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the crowd of elegantly dressed guests. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. At the center of it all stood Victoria, radiant in a white designer gown, holding court with a group of admirers. She saw me before I had taken 10 steps into the room. I watched the progression of emotions cross her face: surprise, confusion, and then disdain. She whispered something to her companions and began making her way toward me. The crowd seemed to part before her, everyone recognizing the Davenport princess on a mission. "Amelia!" Her voice was loud enough to carry design to draw attention. What a surprise! I didn't realize failed entrepreneurs were on tonight's guest list. A few people nearby turned to look, sensing drama. I smiled the same polite smile I had worn for years at family dinners. "Hello, Victoria. Lovely event." I think there's been some mistake. She moved closer, her perfume overwhelming. This is an exclusive event for Davenport Corporation and our valued associates. Surely you didn't think your little tech startup qualified you for an invitation? More people were watching now. I could see Victoria's friends gathering behind her, eager to witness whatever humiliation she had planned. Oh, I don't think there's been any mistake, I said calmly. Victoria's smile turned vicious. She shifted her weight, and suddenly her champagne glass tilted the red wine inside, splashing across the front of my crimson dress. The liquid was cold-shocking, and I knew immediately that it had been deliberate. Oh! Victoria's hand flew to her mouth in mock horror. How clumsy of me. I'm so sorry, Amelia. Her voice dripped with false concern. That dress looked expensive. Well expensive for someone in your circumstances. I hope the stain comes out. Her friends laughed a chorus of cruel amusement. Several guests had pulled out their phones, recording the moment. Victoria turned to the security guard stationed near the entrance. Gentlemen, we have an uninvited guest causing a disturbance. Ms. Ashford here seems to have wandered in off the street. Please escort her out, and make sure she doesn't bother us again. The two large security guards started moving toward me. This was my moment. This was what I had been planning for months. I pulled my phone from my clutch, never breaking eye contact with Victoria. I dialed a number and put the phone to my ear. Davenport Tower Security, this is Amelia Ashford, the new owner of this building. My voice was clear, projected, ensuring everyone nearby could hear. I need the head of security at Sky Lounge immediately. We have trespassers disrupting my event. The silence that fell over the nearby crowd was absolute. Victoria's smile froze on her face. What did you just say? She asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. I lowered the phone, keeping my eyes locked on hers. I said I own this building, Victoria. I've owned it for 60 days. Every square foot from the parking garage to this penthouse venue belongs to me. That's impossible, but her voice wavered. Doubt crept into her eyes. Marcus Davenport emerged from the crowd, his face already red with anger. He had heard enough. What kind of ridiculous game is this, Amelia? The bank would have notified us of any sale. The bank did notify the previous owner, I said calmly. Which is you, Uncle Marcus, or rather was you. The sale was finalized 8 weeks ago. You must have missed the registered letters. But don't worry, I've been a very accommodating landlord up until now. The head of security arrived slightly out of breath from running. He was a professional I had personally vetted and hired when I took ownership. He stopped in front of me, completely ignoring Marcus and Victoria. Ms. Ashford, you called for me? Yes, James, thank you for coming so quickly. I gestured to Victoria and Marcus. These individuals are not on my guest list for this evening. They've been causing a disturbance, including assaulting me with wine. I indicated the stain on my dress. I need them removed from my property immediately. Right away, Ms. Ashford. This is insane. Marcus's voice boomed across the room. Everyone was watching now, the gala forgotten in favor of this real-life drama. I am Marcus Davenport. This is my company's event. This is my building, I corrected, my voice still calm. And you are no longer welcome here. In fact, Davenport Corporation received an eviction notice 2 weeks ago. You have 30 days to vacate your offices. The penthouse residential lease that terminated yesterday. Victoria's face had gone from red to white. You can't do this. I can. I looked at her directly, letting her see everything I had hidden for years. All the hurt and anger and determination. You told me once that charity could be withdrawn at any time. Consider this my withdrawal. The security team moved in, professional and efficient. Marcus tried to argue, threatened lawsuits and countersuits, invoked his connections and influence. Victoria shrieked something about calling the police. But there were too many witnesses, too many phones recording, too many journalists present who recognized a major story when they saw one. I watched as they were escorted out. Victoria's white dress catching on a chair as she struggled, Marcus's dignified image crumbling with every step toward the exit. The crowd was buzzing with shock and speculation. Phones were uploading videos in real time, and I knew that by morning this would be the story everyone in the business world was talking about. When they were gone, I turned to face the remaining guests. Many looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to stay or leave. I picked up a fresh glass of champagne from a passing waiter and raised it. I apologize for the disruption, I said, my voice carrying across the now quiet room. For those who don't know me, I'm Amelia Ashford, CEO of Phoenix Enterprises and the new owner of Davenport Tower. This building has a complicated history for me. My father, James Ashford, was one of the pioneers of modern building automation systems. His work laid the foundation for much of what we take for granted in smart buildings today. I paused, taking a sip of champagne. Unfortunately, after his death, his innovations were claimed by others. His legacy was stolen. I've spent the last 2 years reclaiming what was taken, not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever had their ideas, their work, their worth diminished by those in power. I could see some heads nodding, particularly among the younger entrepreneurs in the crowd. This building represents more than just real estate to me. It represents justice. And now that it's mine, I intend to transform it into something my father would have been proud of. A hub for innovation, for genuine talent, for people who create, rather than those who merely take credit. I raised my glass higher. So please enjoy the rest of your evening. The champagne is excellent and the view is spectacular. And rest assured, under new management, the future of this tower is bright. There was a moment of suspended silence, and then someone started clapping. It was a young woman I recognized as the founder of a successful biotech startup. Others joined in, and soon the applause filled the room. The gala continued, but the energy had shifted. People wanted to talk to me, to hear my story, to position themselves with the woman who had just publicly humiliated Marcus Davenport. I spent the rest of the evening networking, building alliances, and planting seeds for the future. But the war wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. The next morning, I woke to find my phone flooded with messages. The videos from the gala had gone viral. Business news websites were running stories about the mysterious takeover of Davenport Tower. But mixed in with the legitimate reporting were articles from tabloids and gossip sites that seemed designed to destroy me. They claimed I had used seduction to manipulate elderly investors. They questioned the legitimacy of my business success. They dug up photos from my time living with the Davenports and spun narratives about me being a gold digger who had always planned to steal from the family that generously took me in. It was a coordinated attack, and Marcus's fingerprints were all over it. He had deep connections with certain media outlets, and he was using every one of them to discredit me. Within 48 hours, things got worse. 3 of my major contracts with Phoenix Enterprises suddenly hit obstacles. Clients who had been enthusiastic about our technology were now expressing concerns, asking for delays, suggesting we revisit the terms of our agreements. When I dug deeper, I found that Marcus had been making calls using his influence with business partners and board members, poisoning the well against me. I sat in my office at Phoenix Enterprises headquarters, staring at the cancellation notices, feeling the familiar cold grip of fear. This was Marcus showing me that he could still hurt me, that he still had power. He was trying to strangle my company to prove that I couldn't survive without the Davenport name protecting me. But he had made a mistake. He had assumed I was still the girl who could be intimidated, who could be broken by pressure and lies. I picked up my phone and made a call to someone I had never thought I would work with, a lawyer named Ethan Hayes. Ethan had a reputation in the business community. He was brilliant, ruthless, and he had a personal vendetta against Marcus Davenport. 5 years earlier, Marcus had targeted Hayes Legal Group, a mid-sized firm run by Ethan's father. Through a series of calculated business moves, Marcus had destroyed the firm's reputation, stolen their clients, and drove them into bankruptcy. Ethan's father had died of a heart attack 6 months after the firm closed, and Ethan blamed Marcus for his death. Since then, Ethan had rebuilt his career, specializing in taking down powerful men who abused their positions. When I called him, he answered on the second ring. "Ms. Ashford," he said, his voice smooth and professional, "I've been waiting for your call. You've been following the story." "Everyone has. That was quite a power play at the gala." There was approval in his tone. "But I assume you're calling because Marcus has started fighting back. He's trying to destroy my company, calling in favors, pressuring my clients, spreading lies in the media. Classic Marcus Davenport tactics. He used the same playbook on my father." There was an edge of steel in Ethan's voice. "So what do you want to do about it?" "I want to fight back, but I need help. I need someone who understands how he thinks, what his weaknesses are." "Then you've called the right person. But I should warn you, if we do this, we do it right. We don't just defend against his attacks. We dismantle everything he's built. We expose every dirty secret, every stolen idea, every lie. Are you prepared for that level of warfare?" I thought about my father dying young with so much left to create. I thought about 15 years of being made to feel small and worthless. I thought about Victoria's cruel laughter and Marcus's dismissive sneer. "Yes," I said, "I'm prepared." "Good. Meet me at my office in 2 hours. Bring everything you have on the Davenports, every contract, every document, every suspicious transaction. We're going to war." 2 hours later, I walked into Hayes Legal offices, a sleek, modern space in the financial district. Ethan Hayes was younger than I expected, probably only a few years older than me, with sharp features and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He gestured me into a conference room where another man was already waiting. Someone Ethan introduced as Marcus Chen, a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering corporate fraud. For the next 6 hours, I laid out everything I knew about the Davenports. I shared my father's old notebooks showing how Marcus had built his initial fortune on innovations that weren't his own. I provided documentation of how he had mismanaged my trust fund making investment decisions that benefited his companies while depleting my inheritance. I explained the timeline of how he had stolen my building automation project. Ethan and Marcus took notes, asked questions, cross-referenced information. As the sun set outside the conference room windows, Ethan leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Ms. Ashford, you've just handed me the keys to the kingdom. There's enough here to not only defend against Marcus's attacks, but to launch a counteroffensive that will cripple him. But it's going to take time, strategy, and timing. What do you have in mind? First, we stabilize Phoenix Enterprises. I have contacts at the companies that are giving you trouble. I can apply pressure call in some favors, remind certain board members about legal gray areas in their own companies. The attacks on your contracts will stop within a week. And the media campaign? That's trickier. We can sue for defamation, but that takes time and draws more attention to the lies. Instead, I suggest we go on offense. I have a contact at Business Innovator magazine, a highly respected publication. They've been wanting to do a profile on Phoenix Enterprises since you launched. We give them an exclusive interview. You tell your story, the real story about how you went from orphan to entrepreneur. Make yourself sympathetic. Make Marcus look like the villain he is. Won't that seem like I'm asking for pity? No, because you frame it as a success story. You're not a victim anymore. You're a survivor who built something incredible. The media loves that narrative and it's authentic. Meanwhile, Marcus looks like a powerful man attacking a woman who escaped his control. The optics are terrible for him. I considered this. What else? While that's happening, Marcus here will dive deep into Davenport Corporation's finances. I suspect there are irregularities, possibly illegal activities. Marcus Davenport has been playing fast and loose with other people's money for years. We find the proof, and when the timing is right, we expose it. And when is the right time? Ethan's smile was sharp. The Davenport Foundation Charity Gala. It's in 3 months, their biggest event of the year. Victoria chairs the committee. It's a who's who of society, politics, and business. If we're going to bring down the Davenports, we do it when they're at their most visible, most vulnerable. I felt a chill of anticipation. That's poetic. That's justice, Ethan corrected. But between now and then, we have work to do. Are you in? I thought about the choice before me. This path would be difficult, possibly dangerous. Marcus had resources, connections, and a willingness to fight dirty. But I had something he didn't have: the truth and allies who were just as motivated as I was. I'm in. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of calculated moves and countermoves. Ethan was as good as his word. Within a week, the pressure on my business contracts eased. Clients who had been wavering suddenly reaffirmed their commitment to Phoenix Enterprises. 2 of the tabloids that had been most vicious in their attacks quietly issued retractions after receiving legal letters from Hayes Legal. The interview with Business Innovator magazine was published 6 weeks before the gala. The journalist, a woman named Sarah Chen, had done her homework. She interviewed me for hours, spoke to my employees, reviewed Phoenix Enterprises technology, and most importantly, she fact-checked every claim Marcus had made against me. The article was titled, "Phoenix Rising: How Amelia Ashford Turned Betrayal into Billion-Dollar Innovation." It told my story with empathy, but also with respect for my achievements. It detailed how my father's early work had been appropriated by his brother. It showed how I had been pushed out of Davenport Corporation after developing valuable technology. It presented Phoenix Enterprises not as revenge, but as legitimate innovation. Most importantly, it included quotes from clients, employees, and industry experts, praising my work ethic, my technical knowledge, and my leadership. By the time I finished reading it, I had tears in my eyes. Someone had finally told the truth. The article went viral in business circles. Within days, I was fielding calls from investors wanting to meet, from tech conferences requesting me as a keynote speaker, from other entrepreneurs who had similar stories of being overlooked or stolen from. The narrative had shifted. I wasn't the vengeful orphan. I was the innovator who had overcome tremendous obstacles. Marcus tried to fight back, giving his own interview to a rival publication. But his version of events sounded petty and defensive compared to my measured, documented account. His claim that I was ungrateful rang hollow when balanced against the evidence of how he had profited from my father's work and my own innovations. While the media battle played out, Marcus Chen, the forensic accountant, was digging through Davenport Corporation's financial records. Ethan had obtained these through a combination of legal discovery from old lawsuits and information provided by disgruntled former employees. What Marcus found was damning. Davenport Corporation had been cooking its books for years. Revenue was being inflated, expenses hidden, and worst of all, Marcus had been using company funds for personal expenses while claiming them as business investments. There was evidence of insider trading, of bribing building inspectors, of paying off city officials to secure favorable zoning decisions. But the most shocking discovery came from old documents related to my father's death. Marcus Chen found correspondence between Marcus Davenport and the hospital where my father had spent his final months. My father had been dying of cancer, but he had been trying to finalize patents on several major innovations right up until the end. The documents showed that Marcus had been made aware of his brother's condition, but had deliberately delayed visiting, had interfered with my father's attempts to secure his intellectual property, and had moved to take control of my father's company assets even before he died. There was a memo written in Marcus's own hand that essentially laid out a strategy to streamline the transition by ensuring my father's patents went to Davenport Corporation rather than to me as his heir. It wasn't quite murder, but it was monstrous. Ethan and I met in his office to review the findings. The evidence was laid out on the conference table, years of fraud and manipulation documented in meticulous detail. "This is enough to destroy him," Ethan said quietly. "Financial crimes, corruption, possibly even a case for fraudulent acquisition of your father's intellectual property." "When do we release it?" "At the gala. We'll have already contacted the SEC and the district attorney's office beforehand, provided them with copies of everything. They'll want to move quickly once this goes public. But the gala is where we make the dramatic reveal." "How?" Ethan smiled, and for the first time since I met him, there was genuine warmth in the expression. "We're going to give Marcus and Victoria exactly what they want, a public spectacle, just not the one they're planning." While Ethan and Marcus Chen prepared the legal assault, I focused on the financial battlefield. Davenport Corporation's stock had been slowly declining for months, hurt by Phoenix Enterprises' competition and by lingering questions from the Business Innovator article. I began quietly acquiring shares through various investment vehicles, careful to stay below the threshold that would require public disclosure. I wasn't the only one. Ethan had connections with several hedge funds who were willing to bet against Davenport Corporation. As whispers of financial irregularities began to circulate, planted carefully by our team, more investors began dumping their shares. The stock price fell further, making it cheaper for me to buy more. By the time the gala arrived, Phoenix Enterprises controlled nearly 23% of Davenport Corporation. Combined with shares held by allied investors, we had enough to challenge Marcus's control of the board. But Marcus and Victoria didn't know any of this. They were too focused on their event on putting on a show of Davenport power and prestige. The Davenport Foundation Charity Gala was held at the Grandview Hotel, an opulent venue that had hosted presidents and royalty. The guest list included senators, billionaires, celebrities, and every important figure in the state's business community. Victoria had been planning it for a year, and it was meant to be her crowning achievement, a demonstration that the Davenport name still commanded respect despite recent controversies. I received my invitation 6 weeks before the event. It was a surprise. Given our history, I had assumed I would be excluded, but Ethan had a theory about why I had been invited. "Victoria wants to humiliate you again," he said, examining the embossed invitation. "She thinks she has the upper hand now. The media has moved on from the tower takeover. Davenport Corporation's stock has stabilized somewhat, and she has the spotlight at her precious gala. She wants you there so she can publicly demonstrate that you're still beneath her. Then she's going to be very disappointed." "Very. I've arranged for a video package to be prepared, professionally produced, documenting everything we've found. We'll need access to the venue's AV system." "I can handle that," I said. "The Grandview's owner is one of Phoenix Enterprises' clients. He owes me a favor." Everything came together in the final weeks. The SEC confirmed they were ready to file charges against Marcus Davenport, pending the public release of evidence. The district attorney's office had assembled a task force. Allied investors were in position, ready to call for a special shareholders' meeting the moment the news broke. On the night of the gala, I dressed in a midnight blue gown that was elegant but not ostentatious. I wanted to project confidence without arrogance. Ethan accompanied me both as my date and as my lawyer. He looked sharp in a tailored tuxedo, and together we made a striking pair. The Grand View was transformed into a winter wonderland, despite it being early autumn. White flowers covered every surface, crystal icicles hung from the ceiling, and the lighting cast everything in a soft, romantic glow. It was beautiful and completely fake, which seemed fitting for a Davenport event. Victoria was holding court near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by admirers. She wore a stunning silver gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. When she saw me enter, her eyes lit up with malicious glee. She made her way over her entourage, following like baby ducks. "Amelia, how wonderful that you could make it. I wasn't sure you would feel comfortable attending after, well, everything." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said smoothly. "The Davenport Foundation does important work." "How gracious of you to say so." Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "Though I suppose you have a soft spot for charity cases, being one yourself for so long." Her friend snickered. I noticed phones coming out, people positioning themselves to record whatever was about to happen. "Actually, Victoria, I've been thinking about charity a lot lately. About who deserves it and who exploits it." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll see. Enjoy your evening." I moved away before she could respond, leaving her confused and off balance. Ethan and I made our way through the crowd, greeting people, building anticipation. I could feel the energy in the room, the undercurrent of expectation. People sensed that something was going to happen. They just didn't know what. The formal program began at 8:30. There were speeches from foundation board members, testimonials from charity recipients, and a video montage of the good work the Davenport Foundation funded. It was all very touching and perfectly choreographed. Victoria took the stage to deliver the keynote address. She spoke eloquently about the importance of giving back, about how those blessed with wealth and position had a duty to help those less fortunate. The irony was apparently lost on her. "The Davenport family has always believed in lifting others up," she said, her voice ringing through the ballroom. "We've always known that true success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give away." As she spoke, I caught the eye of the AV technician, a young man who had been well compensated for his cooperation. He gave me a subtle nod. "Of course," Victoria continued. "Success must be earned honestly. There are those who try to shortcut the system, who try to claim credit they haven't earned, who build their empires on deception rather than integrity." She was looking directly at me now, and I realized this was her planned attack. She was going to use this moment in front of all these people to publicly shame me. The Davenport name stands for honor, for legitimacy, for... The lights in the ballroom dimmed suddenly. The large screen behind Victoria, which had been showing the foundation logo, flickered to black. Victoria looked confused, then annoyed. She gestured to someone off stage, but nothing happened. Then the screen lit up again, but not with the foundation logo. It showed a document blown up large enough for everyone in the room to read. It was a memo from Marcus Davenport dated 18 years ago, outlining his plan to acquire his dying brother's intellectual property before I, the legal heir, could claim it. The room went silent. Victoria spun around to look at the screen, her face going pale. "What is this?" she demanded. "Turn that off." But the screen changed to another document. And another. Financial records showing fraud. Emails documenting bribery. Bank statements proving Marcus had been embezzling from his own company. Each document appeared for just long enough to be read, to be photographed, to be understood. People in the audience were pulling out their phones, recording, taking pictures. Journalists in attendance were typing furiously. The AV technician had locked the controls, preventing anyone from stopping the presentation. Finally, the screen showed a video. It was professionally produced with clear narration, explaining each document, connecting the dots, building an irrefutable case of corruption spanning decades. Victoria was screaming now, ordering security to shut it down, but it was too late. The evidence was out, witnessed by hundreds of people, and streaming live on several platforms, thanks to reporters in the audience. Marcus Davenport pushed his way through the crowd to the stage. He looked older, suddenly diminished. He grabbed the microphone from Victoria's hands. "This is a fabrication," he shouted. "A malicious attack by a vindictive woman who has never forgiven me for holding her to the same standards as everyone else." I stood up from my seat, and Ethan handed me a microphone that he had prepared for this moment. "Those documents are real, Marcus," I said, my voice carrying through the ballroom. "The SEC has copies, so does the district attorney. They're filing charges tomorrow morning." The crowd turned to look at me. I stepped into the aisle, walking slowly toward the stage. "You stole my father's legacy. You stole my work. You stole from your own company, from investors, from everyone who trusted you. And you did it all while pretending to be a pillar of the community. Marcus's face was purple with rage. You have no proof. I have years of proof. 17 years to be exact. Ever since my father died and you started building your empire on his ideas. I reached the stairs to the stage and climbed them standing just a few feet from the man who had controlled so much of my life. But the irony, Uncle Marcus, is that you didn't even need to steal from him. You weren't smart enough to recognize the value in what you took. You used his early concepts, but never understood the real innovations he was working on before he died. The ideas that have made Phoenix Enterprises successful. Those came from the notebooks you never even looked at, the research you thought was worthless. I turned to face the audience, addressing them rather than Marcus. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting this evening, but I thought you deserved to know the truth about where your charitable donations have been going. The Davenport Foundation is legitimate, and its work will continue, but it will continue under new management. I pulled out my phone and held it up, showing the screen to the room. As of market close today, Phoenix Enterprises, along with allied investors, controls 41% of Davenport Corporation's stock. We held an emergency board meeting 2 hours ago. Marcus Davenport has been removed as CEO. Victoria Davenport has been removed from all company positions. The room erupted. Cameras were flashing. People were shouting questions. Victoria had collapsed into a chair at the side of the stage, her perfect facade finally cracking. Marcus lunged toward me, but Ethan was there, stepping between us, and security was already moving in. "This isn't over," Marcus shouted as security escorted him away. "I'll fight this. I'll destroy you." "You already tried," I said quietly, though I don't think he heard me over the chaos. I turned to the AV technician and nodded. The screen behind me changed one final time, showing a new logo. It combined the Phoenix Enterprises flame with the architectural elements of the Davenport Corporation symbol, creating something new. "The company will be renamed Ashford Davenport Corporation," I announced to the room. "In honor of my father, James Ashford, whose innovations built this empire, and as a reminder of where it came from. We will continue all existing projects and employee contracts, but we will do so with integrity, transparency, and respect for the people who do the actual work of innovation." I looked directly at Victoria, who was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. "The proceeds from tonight's gala will be doubled as originally planned and donated to the Foundation's legitimate charitable work. Additionally, Ashford Davenport Corporation will establish a new scholarship fund for orphan students pursuing careers in technology and engineering. Because I remember what it's like to have nothing and no one. And unlike some people, I don't forget where I came from." The aftermath was swift and brutal for the Davenports. By morning, Marcus had been arrested on multiple charges of fraud, embezzlement, and corruption. His bail was set astronomically high, and his assets were frozen pending the investigation. The evidence we had provided was so comprehensive that his lawyers advised him to negotiate a plea deal rather than go to trial. Victoria fared only slightly better. She wasn't charged with any crimes, as we couldn't prove she had known about her father's illegal activities, but her reputation was destroyed. The society world that had once worshipped her wanted nothing to do with the Davenport anymore. Her friends disappeared, her invitations stopped coming, and she was forced to sell off her possessions to pay her legal bills and mounting debts. The penthouse in my tower, which she had continued living in even after the eviction notice, she was finally forced to vacate, moving into a modest apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. The designer clothes, the luxury cars, the exclusive club memberships, all of it evaporated. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had taken a job in marketing at a mid-level firm, doing the kind of work she had once considered beneath her. Part of me felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but recognition. She was living the life I had once escaped, starting over with nothing, having to prove herself in a world that no longer handed her advantages. The difference was that I had never had those advantages to begin with. I had always known how to struggle. Victoria was learning it for the first time. As for Ashford Davenport Corporation, the transition was rocky, but ultimately successful. We cleaned house, removing executives who had been complicit in Marcus's schemes and promoting talented employees who had been overlooked under the old regime. The company's stock price stabilized and then began to climb as investors recognized that the corruption had been cut out. Phoenix Enterprises merged fully with Ashford Davenport, combining cutting-edge innovation with established infrastructure. Within 6 months, we had launched 3 new products that revolutionized the industry. Within a year, the company's value had tripled. I moved back into the penthouse at Davenport Tower, but I completely renovated it. I erased every trace of Marcus and Victoria, redesigning the space to reflect my own taste, rather than theirs. The back bedroom, where I had once been relegated, became my personal office with windows I had expanded to provide a panoramic view of the city. The only room I left relatively unchanged was a small study that had belonged to my father in the early days before Marcus pushed him out. I found old photographs of him in storage and hung them on the walls. I displayed his notebooks in a glass case. It became a reminder of where all of this started, of the man whose legacy I had reclaimed. Ethan Hayes became not just my attorney, but a trusted advisor and friend. He took a position as general counsel for Ashford Davenport Corporation, bringing his considerable skills to protecting the company from future attacks. And somewhere along the way, our professional relationship deepened into something more personal. 6 months after the gala, I was standing in the penthouse looking out at the city lights when Ethan came to stand beside me. We had just finished a particularly long meeting about international expansion plans. "You did it," he said quietly. "Everything you set out to do, you won." I thought about that. Had I won, Marcus was in prison. Victoria was humbled, and I controlled an empire. But victory felt different than I had imagined. "It doesn't feel like winning," I admitted. "It feels like justice, like balancing scales that were always weighted wrong." "Isn't that better than winning?" I considered this. "Yes," I said finally, "it is." "So what's next?" "You've conquered the business world, reclaimed your legacy, and transformed an entire industry. What does Amelia Ashford do for an encore?" I smiled, watching the city that had once seemed so hostile, but now felt full of possibility. "I build something that lasts. Not just a company, but a legacy that actually helps people. I fund scholarships for kids who have nothing. I mentor entrepreneurs who are being overlooked. I use this power for something better than revenge." "Sounds ambitious." "I learned from the best villains how not to behave," I said with a slight laugh. "Now I need to learn from the best heroes how to do better." Ethan took my hand, and I felt the warmth of the connection. This was something new, built not on need or desperation, but on mutual respect and genuine affection. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you're already doing better. You could have destroyed Victoria completely. You could have twisted the knife, but you didn't. You just let the truth speak for itself. She's destroyed enough. I don't need to add to it." I squeezed his hand. "Besides, I remember what it's like to have nothing. I remember the fear, the uncertainty, the feeling that you'll never be enough. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, not even her." We stood there in silence for a while. Two people who had been damaged by the same man, who had found their way to each other through shared pain and the quest for justice. "You know what the Davenports used to tell me," I said eventually. "They used to say I didn't belong in their world, that I wasn't sophisticated enough, connected enough, worthy enough." And now, I turned to face him, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Now I realized they were right. I don't belong in their world. Their world was built on lies and theft and cruelty. I belong in a better world, one I'm building myself. Ethan smiled. "Then I guess it's a good thing you're such an excellent builder." As I looked out over the city that night, I thought about the girl I had been desperate for approval, willing to sacrifice anything for a family that never wanted her. I thought about the woman I had become, strong, successful, and finally free from the need for their acceptance. The penthouse wasn't a symbol of revenge anymore. It was a symbol of transformation, of a woman who had been broken but refused to stay broken, who had been told she was worthless but proved her own value, who had been pushed down but climbed higher than anyone expected. Marcus Davenport once told me I needed to understand my place. He was right, but my place wasn't beneath him. It was beyond him, in a future he could never have imagined, building things he could never have created, living a life that didn't require stepping on others to rise. They say the best revenge is living well, but I had learned something better. The best revenge is living honestly, building something real, and becoming someone you can be proud of. Not because it hurts your enemies, but because it heals yourself. And as I stood there in my reclaimed home, with a good man beside me, and an empire I had built with my own hands, I finally understood what my father must have felt when he first had an idea that would change the world. He must have felt hope. And hope, I had learned, was stronger than any revenge. Sometimes life forces you to choose between staying in a place that diminishes you or stepping into the unknown to claim what's rightfully yours. The Davenports taught me that blood doesn't make a family and charity isn't love. They taught me that some relationships are designed to keep you small, to extract value while giving nothing back, to convince you that you should be grateful for crumbs while they feast on what belongs to you. But they also taught me something they never intended. They taught me resilience. They taught me that survival is a skill and success is possible even when you start with nothing. They taught me that the opinions of people who don't value you are worthless, no matter how powerful those people appear. So here's what I want to know from you. Have you ever been in a relationship where you gave everything and received nothing, where your value was ignored and your contributions were stolen? Where you were made to feel small so someone else could feel big? And if so, what did you do about it? Did you stay hoping things would change, or did you find the courage to walk away and build something new? Drop a comment and let me know your story. And if this resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the underdog fighting for what's right, hit that like button and subscribe. Because every single one of us has the power to rise from the ashes. We just have to be willing to burn down what's holding us back. Remember, you don't need permission to reclaim your life. You don't need approval to recognize your worth. And you certainly don't need the acceptance of people who never valued you in the first place. The world doesn't belong to those who take. It belongs to those who create. And if you're willing to create, willing to work, willing to stand up for yourself, even when it's terrifying, then there's nothing you can't achieve. Now go out there and build your empire.